You are now listening to theGrio's Black Podcast Network, Black Culture Amplified. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Dear Culture. I'm your host, Panama Jackson, and I'm excited to have this conversation today. One, because I've had a conversation with this multi-hyphenate, brilliant TV mind before, but also because we're going to be talking about TV shows that I love, representation, putting blacks and black stories front and center. Today's guest is a multi-hyphenate. So he is a husband, he is a father, he has a PhD, he's an executive producer, he's a creator, he's a writer, he's a showrunner. He was in Stomp. He was in the play Stomp. He was out there getting it. In the famous words of Big Red from the Five Heartbeats, what do you don't do? Today's guest, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than executive producer of Bel-Air, currently Anthony Sparks. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing real good because I'm sitting here chopping it up with you today. I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Man, it is my pleasure. Like, I'm excited to have you here. One, because I'm a big fan of it. It seems like everything that you work on. So, and we're going to talk about all of that stuff, like from Queen Sugar. I even like Lincoln Heights. I remember watching that show, and
back in the day, hadn't been stuck in that show, I swear.
Man, back in the day, I seen The Blacklist, like, so all these different things. I watched Mike on Hulu, which is another product of yours. Like, you've done so much interesting, like, and it's all different. You've done so much stuff that's culturally resonant, and it's just fascinating because it's all very black too. It's like there's it's representation and storytelling. Yeah. And I gotta tell you, I'm impressed by this because it doesn't seem like everybody gets the opportunity to tell black stories the way they seem to want to. Yeah. So I gotta start at the beginning here. Where does the Anthony Sparks story start in terms of entertainment and getting into entertainment? How did we get here? Well,
I'm a South Side kid from Chicago, South Side of Chicago, vis-a-vis Mississippi, which is where my whole family is from. So that right there gives me, my blackitude is very high, just from that, Mississippi and South Side of Chicago, which I affectionately call South Side of Chicago, Upper Mississippi anyway. So it's that, it is, there's a lot of us up there. And it's, I come from this family, this very large, expansive family. I have 8 or 9 brothers and sisters, depending on how you want to count it, And I just come from a lot of black love. We have our issues like everybody else, in the community. But I just grew up just knowing that I was loved by black people in my community. Teachers, were huge for me. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for teachers who identified that, hey, we got to help this one along, from John D. Shoup School in the hood back in Chicago, and then to my middle and high school, which was a transformative experience, Whitney Young Magnet High School, which is the same school that Michelle Obama actually graduated from years before me.
Very famous high school from my understanding. I knew about Whitney Young before I knew about Chicago, to be real with you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's a special place, and it holds a special place in my heart, and what it did for me in terms of blowing open my world. And, if I hadn't gone to Whitney Young, there's no way I would have had the nerve to jump on a plane and go someplace I'd never been, which was Los Angeles, to go to USC, School of Dramatic Arts. I'd never even been to California, when I came out here to go after my fortune, at that time. So that's how it sort of began.
So were you in school plays and stuff like that?
Absolutely. I was that nerd theater kid that y'all be making fun of. This is what he looks like when he grows up.
Well, I was that guy too, so I just want to be clear. I was that guy too. I was the black thespian in my high school. I was that guy.
Exactly. That's definitely where it started to take off and become something very serious for me. It actually started in the church. The black church was where I actually started doing my first, the Christmas pageant, the Easter pageant,
Yes.
I remember asking if I could recite The Creation by James Weldon Johnson, to the congregation. Didn't understand half of it, but I just, that was my first solo show, actually. From there, high school, middle school and high school, went to Whitney Young Magnet. And that was a place where I really started getting exposed to a lot of plays and that I might not have read before and stuff like that. And thinking about, like, am I going to take the risk to do this, for the rest of my life, or at least try to do it at that time? And that was a difficult decision because I could take a test. I did okay in school. I did well in school, and I could have done other things. I could have gone the law school route. I could have, gone to business school, and I had people who were pushing and encouraging me to do something safe. And instead I did this thing that was very, very subjective, which means people can like your stuff or they cannot like it, right? But my mom, God bless her, she was always supportive of whatever I wanted to do. And she said, as long as you really go after what you're going to do and you educate yourself to the highest level that is available to you to do it, which for me meant going to USC in the School of Dramatic Arts. As long as you do that, I will support you. And so I had a lot of emotional support. I grew up, very working class, poor, as we used to call it sometimes.
Right.
But I was rich in emotional support.
So you wanted to be an actor, like that? Is that where you saw your trajectory going? You were going to be just an actor, full stop?
Absolutely. Now, I was always writing, and it's so funny how things work, because when I think about like competitions and stuff that I would do in high school, I would usually win or place, so I knew I could compete at a pretty early age in those arenas. But in retrospect, I would usually win first place in writing and second place in acting, actually, like NAACP, AXO. That big program, like I won first place in writing and second place in acting, or dramatics as they called it, And so that was already in the back of my head that I had this other skill set. Okay. But you have to understand, growing up in the early 90s and late 80s and South Side of Chicago, the idea of being a TV writer, a producer, like, what is that? A showrunner? We didn't even have that term then. That wasn't in the popular lexicon. We didn't know what that was. So the only way I could have gotten to what I do now is I had to go through theater and acting, because that's what I knew and I was good at it and I was committed to it. But when I came to USC in the theater school and started hanging around the film school, I started seeing, flyers and stuff for like the Warner Brothers writing program and TV writer. What is that? Oh, those names mean something on the screen? That's a job that somebody does? That's how it sort of started to sort of plant that seed. And then when I got to New York and I was acting on stage and Stomp and stuff like that, I was having a great time, a great career, but I was starting to feel some limitations for my growth as a young Black brother trying to do a certain type of material. I wasn't trying to be robbing nobody on screen all the time. I went, whatever it was that was available was very limited. And so it became a very practical and a creative answer. I got to write myself into the narrative or I'm not going to be there very long.
I want to talk so much about that. Yeah. So we're going to take a real quick break here, and then we'll come back and talk more with Anthony Sparks about how he got started as a writer. Like, because that is such a fascinating world and foray to me. So I'm looking forward. So stay tuned right here on Dear Culture. We'll be right back. All right, we're back here on Dear Culture, and we're talking with Anthony Sparks about his career journey. And he was just explaining to us how he started acting and how he was exposed to the writing world and talking about writing yourself into the narrative. So I'm really fascinated by the idea of becoming a writer. Like, I'm a writer, but you're like a TV writer and like all of that stuff. So like, what was that? You talked a bit about how you realized that might be another way to get into. You had this talent that was there anyway, but you found limitations in acting. But how was it making the leap to decide, I'm going to start doing this, and then it working?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you read a person's bio or whatever, you have to remember you're getting the greatest hits, right? You're getting a compilation of the times that of the yeses that added up. You know, a career can be made by, you know, one person or maybe the right 5 people saying yes. So there are a lot of no's along the way. It didn't always work out in such a linear way, but I have been blessed. I work hard, but I've been very fortunate to have people who valued what they saw in me and poured into me. So I'm in New York. I'm acting on stage every night. I'm performing in Stomp. I'm also doing Shakespeare. I'm doing voiceovers. I'm making a living as an actor for 10 years. Started to feel like, as I was trying to move into the film and TV space, the theater thing was happening, but the TV and film thing was not happening. I was having casting directors say crazy stuff to me and the woman who would go on to become and is still my wife, you know, who is also an actor. And she's this chocolate sister who's very trained and went to NYU and very talented, deeply, deeply talented. And we were just hearing crazy stuff like, you don't exist, you're talented, but you're type, you don't seem like you come from Chicago. What is, you know, like da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. And these were white people telling me this a lot of the time. It was a real mind, you know, screwed with your mind ahead a lot, and your spirit eventually too, to have people who largely don't look like you telling you that you don't represent you.
Right.
Okay. So then you go, but I came from a lot of people who look just like me and act just like me. I'm special. I ain't that special. You know, a lot of brothers like me, you know, there's Panama, there's me, you know, people I went to school with. So I realized after about 5 years of pounding the pavement and having some success in TV and film, getting commercials and all that other stuff, but most of my career being in theater, I went, if I'm going to stay in this space, I'm going to have to come at it another way because they're not seeing me. They don't think I exist. They straight up are telling me that. So I came across this book called The Showrunners in a bookstore one day in New York in the TV film section of Barnes and Noble. And it described what a showrunner did. And the name of the book was The Showrunners, The Real Stars of Television. Out of print now, but I got a couple of copies. And I was like, this is what you should be doing. Like, if you can learn how to write, you can make a good living, and you can also be adding to the cultural conversation. You can make it maybe a little easier for the Anthony Sparks 10 years down the road to actually have a place to ply their trade, you know, as a performer. And then I was in New York. It was a great time for me, and being on the East Coast, because I was just drinking in all of this culture about representation. And, you know, I was just getting, you know, deeply immersed in my blackity black, you know, whatever you want to call it, right? Kind of process. And so I came into TV with the idea that I was going to write myself and people like me into the narrative, or try, at least try. And that was the goal. And if I can make a living doing that, even better, you know.
So this begs the question though, because, and you mentioned something earlier. So we're gonna kind of talk representation and show running in the same space with Queen Sugar for me, because, you know, for me, that was easily one of my favorite shows that's ever existed.
Everything just feels different all of a sudden.
A pay stub is a requirement of your parole.
Could have given me a heads up that you were going to write an article taking down the entire police department.
Thank you so much for the support.
Man, I cannot stress how much I enjoyed that show for a couple reasons. One, the representation piece you're talking about. I had never seen characters like any of those on screen. I still contend, and I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to do it, about, and I told you this, about Ralph Angel being like the most like complete, complex black male character to ever exist on screen.
Y'all serious right now? You willing to just let the family legacy go like that?
Like, I've been like beating my head against the wall trying to figure out what and how I'm going to address that in what platform at some point. Similarly, I had never heard the term showrunner. Actually, you know, I think the word showrunner really hit like the black consciousness when Prentice Penny with Insecure, we started hearing that. I remember when Insecure dropped, they started talking about the showrunner. I'm like, who in the hell is the showrunner? Like, what does that have to do with any of this? Like, I didn't understand that. But all of a sudden now I see it as a part of every conversation with every show, like the showrunner, the showrunner, the showrunner. So tell me a bit about like being a showrunner, and then
Mm-hmm.
how the Queen Sugar thing came into be. And this is where the representation part's like,
Right.
how intentional was all of that with the way you all were writing and depicting? And like, it was like, perfect is a strong word, right? I don't know that anybody ever hits perfection, but I've never felt so seen by characters that don't even represent my life. You know what I mean?
Got it. Well, yeah, I mean, you know, Queen Sugar was such, you know, I did almost a whole series. I did 6 seasons. You know, they decided to do a 7th, and by then I was contracted somewhere else to go to other places. But that show will always be a special part, not only of my resume, but of my heart. You know, I gave a lot to that show, and I'm thankful that I could do that. It was created for television by Ava DuVernay, based on the book by Natalie Bazile. And in some ways they're similar, but in a lot of ways they're different. And you know, I agree with you 100% about the Ralph Angel character. One of them, and that was the character that frankly made me want to do the show. Actually, when I first read the pilot script, I was like, this guy I know, this guy I like, let's do this. You know. It's so, you're right. Show running, you know, you sometimes hear about show creators and showrunners, and oftentimes they're the same person, but oftentimes they are not. You know, because a creator, that's one script, you know, and you're trying to then get to somewhere between 50 and 100 episodes if you can, you know, based on the world that was set up in that script. And so TV becomes a collaborative process in that way. But generally speaking, you need somebody there who is a lead creative voice, who's there every day, just living in that world and guiding that ship, you know, usually in combination with the creator, if they're still around, as that was the case with Queen Sugar and Ava DuVernay. But you need someone who deeply cares and is deeply capable of delivering that show week in and week out, you know? And to me, being in that position means that you are also taking on the responsibility of representation, of showing us if it's a show that's in the Black community or having Black characters, showing us with complexity, you know, and making that legible to your financial partners in a way that they let you, you know, get real and do what you want to do. So that's where the benefit of being on the Oprah Winfrey Network and having Oprah Winfrey as an executive producer was really, really beneficial, because, you know, she's a powerful woman. And so you could put that show out there and not over explain it. And that's part of the reason for its success, I think, you know. If it were somewhere else, we would not have been able to do that show exactly the way that we did it. I am probably fairly certain in saying that, you know.
Yeah, there's no way that this show lives and was as like authentic, as well lit. It looked amazing. Like everything about it, the way that it was like set up was like I said, perfect is strong. But I just remember the conversations I had amongst my friends when we were trying to decide, like, we want to talk about a show that actually represents us, and we all watched Queen Sugar. Like, this show is amazing. Like, yeah. I love everything about it.
I just want to comment, like, even on the lighting piece, right? You know, which obviously is directors and cinematographers, but it's an aesthetic that is definitely, you have to value that. Do you know how many young Black kids we have rolling around in this country who don't think that they are beautiful because when they look at images on TV and film, they don't know that they're looking at Black people who aren't lit correctly? You know, they don't know that. They just know that some reason the aesthetic isn't as pleasing. And then that makes them think, oh, maybe, you know, other people are more attractive. Like, that's a taboo thing to say, but people think that, you know, and then have to find a way to overcome that.
What did you all feel as people creating and working in it, and just Like, I mean, Kofi Siriboe became a superstar, you know,
Exactly.
through this show. Like, you know, we didn't know who he was at first, and all of a sudden, this man's
He
on
needed
magazine
security.
covers and everywhere. Like,
Yeah, and he needed security at the Essence Festival. Yeah, he was in danger.
I bet he did.
The reception was, I knew from day one we were working on something that could be special. I just been around long enough to have a sense like, you know, there are a lot of things that have to go right, but the intentionality is there for it to be something special. It was on the right network. It had the right kind of support, had the right kind of vision. The writer's room in particular, and TV, your writer's room, outside of your cast, there is no more important decision about a show, I think, is who is going to write it. And we just had a really great group of writers who poured their heart into the show and poured love into it. And Ava was able to capture that, and it showed up on the screen, you know? So
Absolutely.
yeah. You know, my mother, for example, of all the shows I've done, she has since passed, and she passed while I was writing and producing Queen Sugar. It was definitely her favorite show that I ever done. And the reason was because she recognized those people. She had never seen people that represented her and that she recognized being rendered in such complexity and in such beauty, and with such excellence. And so I'm very pleased that if she had to leave this realm, that she left watching her son do something that was incredibly meaningful to her and a lot of people.
Love it. All right, we're going to take a break right here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what you're doing now, another legacy show, and how it's impacting the community. So we're going to take a quick break here on Dear Culture. We'll be right back. All right, we're back here on Dear Culture. We're here with Anthony Sparks. We just got finished talking about Queen Sugar, which is a show that creatively introduced an entire world of blackness and representation that I don't think we'd ever seen before. But you then moved to Bel-Air. You became the executive producer and a writer for the second season of Bel-Air, which is the reimagining of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but in a more dramatic role.
10 years is a long time.
Let me show you around.
Where them dimes at?
Hillary. Let's go find you something fit for a prince.
What do you think?
I made you look.
And I have to ask, what's it like going from a space that you literally have complete creative license on where that world is going? Like you said, the book, the show was very different than the book, right? I mean, there are new characters that weren't even in the book that are main characters in the show. And then you go to Bel-Air, which has its own history, its own legacy. People feel a way about the way, you know, people felt very strongly about Bel-Air, you know what I mean? And in the first season, I love it. I'm a huge fan of the show. Watch every episode. I'm mad that I don't have advanced screeners to watch the whole thing. But, you know, so what's it like stepping from a world where you have complete creative control of that world to one where you have to honor some of the history and the legacy and the stories that have already been created?
You know what? First of all, that is a fantastic question. I just want to, like, the fact that you even could draw out that difference, because it is a huge, and particularly in my body of work and career thus far, it is a huge difference going from that, right? You know, people love the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. They feel a certain kind of way about it. And now you dare go reinterpret it. Like, there were 5,000 ways this could go wrong. 5,001 ways it should go wrong. And it didn't. And I will credit that to some very smart decisions that were made by the people who reimagined this, Morgan Cooper and some other writers and producers that were on the team that first season, and continuing this season with myself and Paula Banks Waddles. You know, what was attractive to me about the show, and what I think is resonating with people, is even though The Fresh Prince was a sitcom, the premise is actually fairly dramatic.
How come you don't want me, man?
Like, what Morgan Cooper did was just take the premise seriously, you know. And I would argue there's a world in which if TV had been evolved to the point where it is now, particularly for Black characters and shows featuring Black folks, that it maybe should have always been a drama, actually, you know, given that premise. And in the 21st century, you could now take a chance and do that, as opposed to the 80s early 90s, where maybe there wasn't as much space in the TV realm to do that.
They just wanted to see us laughing and jolly on screen, and now we could do it differently.
Yeah, you cutting through the politic way that I'm saying it. Exactly. You know, we could just say, take this seriously. Now, why I loved and wanted to do the show when the opportunity came to me is because if you take that premise seriously, what you're actually doing is a show about the interior life journey of a young Black male. And how often do you get to see that? This is a brother from West Philly who defines his Blackness and his manhood to himself in a particular kind of way. That gets completely blown up. And he has to go to something that is unfamiliar to him and unfamiliar to probably the majority of Black folks, which is Black wealth. And because we have become so good in our community at taking the thing that we struggle with and has been oppressed upon us and turning it into some kind of virtue, and even turning it sometimes into an authenticity test for what it is to be Black. Now, what is it now that you don't have that? Now that the lights are going to stay on, you're not struggling for money. You have caviar in the refrigerator if you want. I suppose that's where you keep caviar. I don't know. You know, but I'm saying, you know, I don't either. So
point taken.
So, you know, so what is that journey? And so so you see that push and pull and that tension in the show of him trying to decide, especially this season, he's basically gone out and tried to recreate what he had in West Philly, even though he lives in Bel-Air, you know, vis-a-vis the basketball piece. You know, how's that going to work out? You know, it's probably going to be a little bumpy. And so it's going to force him to go inside by the end of the season, without me giving away spoilers, to ask, who am I now? Who am I when I get to decide, when I get to choose the circumstances of my life day to day, and it's not defined through struggle? Are you less Black? Are you less of a young Black man? Or is there a different way to be? So, you know, basically the show is about, we're not a monolith.
You know what I will say too? It's interesting because this is two shows that you've worked on that I'm familiar with, where like the Black male characters are supremely complex, and it's not even Will I'm talking about. It's the Carlton character on Bel-Air.
You're a long way from home, Mo.
Oh, Tim, how you been? You know, thriving.
I hope one day we can talk about why you're really here.
I love that character because I hate him so much.
Yes.
But he has such an amazing arc, like, as a person. Like, Will coming in changes his whole world. But, like, the way that the Carlton characters, like, you forget that everybody else has to deal with this new reality and how that impacts the world that they live in. And you get to see his struggles with his Blackness, with his mental health, like just having to navigate this world where Will comes in and is cooler than him in a lot of ways, but he's still like it's fascinating. Like I love that character. And
I do too.
I do need somebody to explain to me where Carlton learned how to fight. Because in that latest episode, he's putting them paws on that dude. And I'm like, where in the world does this dude learn how to fight like that? Because those were good punches. And I'm like, there ain't no way in the world that Carlton knows how to fight like this. So I need somebody to explain that. But I love Carlton's character on this show just for what he's bringing, like what has been allowed to be brought out of that character, since he doesn't have to be funny. He's not just a foil. He's a real full human. And I love what's happening with him as a black man who's already experienced all of the stuff that Will is now learning, but having to navigate the keeping it real part of it. Like, I think that's so fascinating.
You know what? I love that character too. And I love the reimagining of, like, who is this person if he doesn't, as you said, if he doesn't have to be like the funny foil? Like, what are his issues? how does he cope with them? And that gets us into this mental health piece, which allows us to have that conversation that we don't have enough in the Black community about how do you, like prioritize mental health and then how do you deal with it? And what does it cost a character, a Black character in that world if they haven't dealt with some of their stuff, right? Okay. So look, I got 2 kids in private school, 2 boys in private school, that whole journey, and a daughter who just graduated from that kind of world. And while you go into those spaces, because that's unfortunately in our country where most of the best education or, is sort of behind those gates, unfortunately. But I know if you're, you got 3 kids too, right?
4.
Yeah.
4.
You got 4. Okay. You've got 4. Congratulations. Yep. Okay. And
Thank you.
Your prayer is that they go through their school journey and come out not only educated and can compete in that realm, but healthy and whole, right? That's the prayer, right? Every day of every moment of every day. You're like, you want them to be self-affirming. You want them to you just want them to not be messed up, right? So the great thing about that character is we get to dramatize, well, why do we have to say that prayer so hard when you send them into these environments? We've not really seen a complex, dramatic sort of point of view on that. Because a lot of times when you have like a wealthy Black character or whatever, they're presented just as this jerk who just, hates everybody and looks down their nose at other people. And we never get to see, well, what's going on beyond that, because usually they're not the main character. They are literally brought in, generally speaking, the rich Black foil. In this case, he's a main part of the show. We get to go deeper.
Yeah, he is amazing. All right, we're going to take one more break here. And when we come back, we're going to do some of my favorite segments on the show, which are Black Fashions and Black Recommendations. But I have another question for you that's a little more personal, but based on what you just said. So we're going to take one more break here in Dear Culture. We'll be right back. All right, we're back here in Dear Culture, and I'm still here with Anthony Sparks. We've been talking about Bel-Air and the complexity of the Carlton character and just the story in general. And, one thing I love about that show is the family aspect of it, of course. I mean, that's part of the draw. We all loved Uncle Phil. We all loved Aunt Viv, whichever version is your favorite and all of that. But one thing I've noticed about you, because I follow you on social media, is you seem to be as present a husband and father as you are a professional. How? You seem so busy. How do you manage to be able to balance so well? Because that's what I notice a lot when I'm following you on social media. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, his kids are all in here. Like, he spends a lot of time in seemingly all the places. And I feel like that's a lesson we all need to learn.
Man, that's a great question. First of all, thank you for noticing, and thank you for even valuing that enough to ask about it. It is not automatic, as you well know. It obviously takes effort, but it is labor. But it is a labor of love, though. I did not grow up with my biological, so I consider perhaps the most pioneering thing I've done in my life is be a husband and father, the kind of husband and father I'm striving to be. There is nothing more important than that. My career is incredibly important. My art is very important. My creativity is very important. I have a creative household. My wife is creative. She's bad, but so we do have a common purpose that way, and we both value that and give each other space to do what that needs to be. It's not a competition. I told her recently, I said, hey, you got to get more sleep. This don't work without you. Like, none of this don't work without you. And
she appreciated that.
And she's amazing. She's an easy person to love. I guess the thing is it's the priority. It is a priority. And I'm blessed that my ascendancy in my career in terms of being in charge or being high level has come at a time where I do need to be present for my kids. So, hey, y'all, I'm setting it up and blah, 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 blah. I got to dip out for 2 hours. My son's running a track, thing. or my son's playing basketball or whatever. And so it's very important that I'm very organized when I'm doing my thing, because I'm trying to make space by being efficient in my work so that I can be present for my family, in that way.
What I hear is be intentional, right? You need to be intentional about, your time and your space and how you prioritize it. And I think that's a lesson in every conversation I've had with anybody about fatherhood or being a good husband, being a good father, all that stuff. It all seems to come down to you have to put in the effort and you have to be intentional with the way that you want to do it. You can't just wake up and hope it all works. You have to make these things work the best way that you can. You know what I mean? And that's as good of advice or anything that anybody I think is ever going to give and I've ever heard. So point taken. It's fascinating to see. Time for a quick break. Stay with us. And we're back. So one of my favorite segments here at the show, when we come to a close, we do two things. We do Blackfessions and we do Blackmentations. Our Blackfessions are confessions that people might be surprised to learn about you because you Black, right? And I'm always amazed at the kind of things that people show up with, the movies they haven't seen or the books they haven't read, the people they hate, whatever it is. It's we always like to say we're not a monolith, and this is always an opportunity to prove it. So do you have a Blackfession for us?
I do. And it's a stereotype to begin with. So let me just say that I don't participate in. But since you're asking, I hate watermelon. Can't stand it. Cannot stand.
People
watermelon.
do say that. I don't know how you can hate watermelon. It's so wonderful. It tastes so great.
I can't. It's so.
Has this always been the case? Have you been like this your whole life?
It's so messy, and it's a lot of work for a little payoff, and it's too many seeds, and it's just too much. It's too much. Like when I go to a juice shop or something, and they're like, "Oh, watermelon smoothie," I'm like, I can't think of anything more disgusting. I gotta be honest with you.
It's funny you said it's a lot of work for a little payoff. That's very funny to me.
It's a lot of work, And so when I was younger, growing up, people like, "Oh, we got some new, melon coming," and and people get excited. It's a hot day in Chicago and stuff like that, And I would just sit there just looking at people like judging, like,
Thank you for that Blackfession. To counter these Blackfessions, we also ask people to share Blackmentations, which are recommendations by, for, and about something in the Black culture, Black community. Basically, we ask people to share something that they think other people in the community should be up on, should be aware of, should be checking out. And a lot of people have, you're a creative, you have a lot of things that you work on that could be anything. So do you have a Blackmentation for us?
Yeah, I think it's for parents. I'm going to get it wrong, but there's a great book out about college admissions for Black families that these two brothers just wrote. Okay, yeah. What's the name of it? I'm doing such a bad job. I can't think of the name of the book.
I know what you're talking about. It's like everything you need to know about college admissions kind of thing, but I know exactly it's downstairs in my library. But I do have that book and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it might be as simply as like college admissions for Black families. It's something like that. If you Google that, that's a book that I have enjoyed reading. I just went through the process, and the college admissions process is changing so quickly, due to the pandemic and test optional becoming more prevalent and all that other stuff. So I just think I like the sort of even-keeled manner in which those brothers kind of talk about how we have to have our own priority list, not get caught up and swept up in sort of the stuff that other folks be talking about, because it may or may not be the thing that's right for your particular kid, And so that might be a little bit of a left Blackmendation, a little bit left,
No, that's perfect. That's wonderful. And it's called The Black Family's Guide to College Admissions. So it was simple, by Timothy Fields and Shareem Herndon Brown.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
We'll make sure we make sure we put that up on the screen so people can see that what it's called. But yeah, I'm familiar with that book. I also bought a copy of it. I'm some years away from that, but You can never start too early, right?
You said you have a 13. Is your oldest 13? You said 14, 13, 14?
14. She just turned 14. She starts high school next year. So
okay,
my plan was for her to go to Spelman, but it turns out she wants to be an actor in life. So now she's looking at all these other schools, the Carnegie Mellons and all that type of stuff, because that's where her mind is. So, who knows where she's going to end up. So I will be reading this book.
Keep my personal information if she stays on that track, because that was my pathway, and so, I was auditioning and applying to the Carnegie Mellons and the NYUs and the USCs and the Northwest, all those Juilliard and all that other stuff. Yep. And it is a very particular way to go through the college admissions process. And I have some thoughts about it, so yeah.
I will absolutely be reaching out when time comes. Sir, thank you for being here. Where can people, where can people find Anthony Sparks and your work and everything?
You can watch, what I've been working on Bel-Air, which is on Peacock, dropping weekly now for another 6 or 7 weeks. But you can find me on Insta at Sparks Anthony, sparks.anthony. Same thing on Twitter, Sparks Anthony. I'm there. And, keep an eye out. I got a lot of stuff going on that I'm not able to talk about right now, but I'm very excited about the things that I am working on that have not dropped yet, but I'm blessed. I'm working with an Oscar winner. I'm working with an Emmy winner. I'm working with a Pulitzer Prize winner. I'm doing a lot of stuff that is keeping me very, very busy and engaged. And it takes a while for it to kind of go through the TV process before you see it, but it's coming and I'm excited about it.
Thank you for sharing a little time with us here at Dear Culture. Like I said before, it seems like the work that you do is 100% right up my alley. Like, it's all the stuff that I'm the most interested in culturally. So I genuinely appreciate all you've done, what you will do. I love Bel-Air. I'm watching it every week. Obviously, I watched all of Queen Sugar. And I'm keeping up. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you got going on in the future. Thank you for your time. You are greatly appreciated. Keep representing us. I love the storytelling and the way that you represent Black people and just people in general. People who happen to be Black. We are telling stories here, and I thank you for everything that you bring to the table.
Thank you so much, Panama. Thank you. I appreciate that deeply. Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who's listening to Dear Culture here. We are an original podcast of the theGrio Black Podcast Network. Our producer is Sasha Armstrong, and Regina Griffin is our managing editor of podcasts. So make sure you stay tuned. Check us out every week. Thanks for listening. I'm Panama Jackson. Have a Black one.
We started this podcast to talk about not just what Black writers write about, but how.
Well, personally, it's on my bucket list to have one of my books banned. I know that's probably bad, but I think...
Ooh, spicy.
They were yelling N-word, go home. And I was looking around for the N-word because I knew it couldn't be me because I was a queen.
But I'm telling people to quit this mentality of identifying ourselves by our work, to start to live our lives, and to redefine the whole concept of how we work and where we work and why we work in the first place.
Honor to be here. Thank you for doing the work that you're doing. Keep shining bright. And like you said, we gonna keep writing Black.
As always, you can find us on the theGrio app or wherever you find your podcasts.